All right, so we're going to start. So we're going to start on page 164. We're coming to the end of this packet. So 164 we're on Baba Metzia. Now my practice is to mention where we are in the traditional text, chapter 9. We're on page 104b. And then we're moving to 104a. That's the traditional pagination. But what we have here is 164. And we're talking about a concept called iska, which we talked about the last 3 times. I'm going to very quickly define it again. An iska is a partnership where you have an active partner and you have an investor. And the investor is giving the money. And the Talmud spends a lot of time, not in this chapter in particular, so that's why we're not going to spend so much time unpacking it, but they're talking about it right now. But the issue, as I mentioned last time, is you're not allowed to loan at interest in the Torah. That's forbidden. So in a more sophisticated economy, though, you need investments, and investments are a kind of loan because you're expecting some return back on your investment. So the rabbis come up with a complicated concept called an iska. So I'll simplify it as best I can, whereas you give some money to start a business. And remember, it's just the investor. It's the active partner on the ground who's going to do the work, plow the field, sell the Pepsi, whatever it might be. So you divide the money. And all of this is to get around the prohibitions against lending at interest. And, very important too, although we don't talk about it much, to protect the interest of the active partner who has no money. And there's a fear that he's going to be exploited. And there's some interest also, we talked about it last week too, in protecting the interest of the investor, but a little less interest. Okay, so the money is divided into 2 pots. One pot of money is a loan. So it's a loan. Remember, a loan, you can't pay back with interest. So the investor has every expectation that he's going to get that money back at some point. He's not going to get interest on it. And the Talmud actually classifies that as having no risk at all, because no Jew would not pay back their loan. I mean, that they're just assuming there's a moral imperative to pay back loans, so the Jew getting the loan is going to pay back the loan. But there's also no interest. You don't pay it back with interest, and also the borrower, who is the active partner, can do whatever he or she wants with the money. Although we talked about that before, you can't go spend it on beer and drink on it. In the iska itself, that's what we talked about last week. In the iska itself, there is an assumption that you're going to use the money for the business. Okay, the other pot of money, and this is just, money is fungible. Remember, fungible is that meaning that you don't differentiate a dollar from a dollar. So you arbitrarily divide the money into 2 pots. One is a loan, the other is a deposit. So a deposit is the investor is giving you a deposit, his money. It's still his money, but you can do whatever you want to with that money. But and there's a risk you might lose that money in the business, but every dollar you make with that money is profit that the investor gets back. The investor gets it back, all of it. Okay, so there's half of the money where the investor gets no interest at all, just gets it back at some point, and you can do whatever you want to with it. Half is a deposit where it's very clear what should be done with the money, and all the profit goes to the investor. Okay. That's that's all called an iska, and that allowed businesses to flourish to this very day. And I shouldn't say to this very day. I'm sure they don't have this anymore in modern Israel. But you hear echoes of it in modern sophisticated economies. How you're designating money that you use to start a business, and plus the idea of an active partnership versus the capital. It's quite common even in our day today. All right, we are looking at page 164. Any questions, by the way, before we move on? Because those concepts are pretty important.
Are there any more of those?
Yeah, it's complicated. The issue is, are there?
Yeah, how do you decide when you get a dollar profit which profit gets paid back?
You decide ahead of time. We're gonna get to that. So there's because you can imagine the borrower just saying, "Gosh, it's too bad that that all the profit is coming from the loan, and none of it is coming from the deposit. Gosh, that's a shame. Bad luck for you." So that, and obviously he's got an incentive to do that. So that we're going to talk about that for a second. So there's some protections that it's got to be very clear, in the agreement itself, and it's inherent in the iska that it's divided in half. The answer, I'll read it. We'll read it in a second. Other questions? Okay. Are there any more texts? We really ran out of text. That's okay. All right. So we'll print up some more. We're almost done with this packet. When we're finished with this packet, I think we're going to go on to a different chapter entirely and a different topic. Okay. Anyway, Amar Rava, page 164. Chada iska utrei shtare pseda lemalve. Okay. So if you have there's an iska. I already explained what an iska is, but you may be tempted in drawing up the documents for an iska to make two documents. That would make sense, right? Because you're dividing two pots of money. So you've got a document that's got the loan. This directly responds to your question. So, the rabbis right away came up with your question. and they came up with a system where that might happen and how you get around it, okay? Because there might be a temptation to come up with two documents. One document would be for the loan, and one document would be for the deposit. If that happens, pseda de malve, the investor is going to lose money. Why? For exactly the reasons I talked about just a second ago. Because the borrower can easily say, gosh, it's just too bad. Like all the losses are on your side, right, and all the gain is on my side. What a terrible coincidence for you. Because you made two documents, and you specified this is a loan and this is a deposit, money's fungible, so it's up to the active partner to decide, well, the gains are all on my side and the losses are all on your side. So that's why you want one document that says this is an iska, and then the money is by definition divided. So all the losses are shared together and all the profit is shared together. But if you mess things up, that's what it's saying. If you mess things up by making two documents, then if you are the investor, you fall into that risk, and you may end up with a dishonest partner acting within the law who's going to get all the profit and not take any of the risk. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so that responds to it. It's not two documents where you actually specify the money. This money goes to this money goes to this. It's inherent in the whole enterprise that you're going to divide everything. Okay? The Steinsaltz, if you'd like, following Rashi, does all the math. And that's what I said I would not do. I'm not going to do the math. I'm not going to give you an example. If you want, you can find it. But Rashi does the math and explains how, through some clever math, in the first case, if there's two documents, the borrower can make all the money. And in the second case, where you actually, the borrower, which is the heart of the iska, the ideological heart, which is they both share in the profits and they both share in the loss. Okay. Now, trei iska, another temptation you might fall into, which could lead to something bad, an inequitable distribution of profit or loss, is that you have two iskas. So people get together and they do two businesses. They could be related. We're going to sell Coke together and we're going to sell the Coke bottles, but it's actually two different businesses. You may be tempted to take these two different businesses, which require different skills, maybe different personnel, and make one document with the two businesses. If that happens, the chad shtara, so you make one document with the two businesses, pseda de love. At this point, the active partner, the borrower, is going to lose out. Now, here, I'm actually just going to read Steinsaltz's explanation because he does it so much better than me, it wouldn't be possible for me to improve on it. And it's complicated too, okay? So if you look, I'm really at where it says translation and commentary towards the bottom of the page, where it says the borrower is the loser. You find the little 5 in the fat lines towards the bottom. It's a 5 lines. The borrower, the active partner, is the loser because the two transactions were combined in a single document. It would have been to his advantage to treat the two transactions as separate, for in that way the investor would bear half of the loss and receive only 1/3 of the gain. But since the two iskas were combined into a single transaction, the total loss is deducted from the total profit, and the investor takes 1/3 of the net gain. So the investor comes out ahead then when you combine it. So the Talmud is warning you, don't do that. Make sure your businesses are separated, and therefore both will share the profit and the loss. And in the first case, it's saying don't make two businesses out of one, because if you do that, the borrower is at an automatic advantage. Okay, that's it. So basically, they're trying to help us, getting past the details, they're trying to help us define what an iska is. Iska's got some inherent, partners are accepting both risk and loss. It gives slightly more risk to the investor. That's necessary because you can't lend at interest, so you have to be seen as taking risk. And but there's going to be possible disadvantages through manipulating the law for both the borrower and the investor. So the Talmud here warns us: treat each iska as separate, but don't divide a single iska into two things: the loan pot and the deposit pot. Okay?
Isn't there a reason that the lender should get some benefit in terms of an incentive, so that he overcomes that risk issue?
So here he does get some benefit. The whole deposit money, remember, he gets all of the profit. He gets 100% of the profit on half of the business, which I guess turns into what? I said I wouldn't do the math, but it comes into a quarter, right? So he's going to get a quarter of the business no matter what. So that's pretty good. That's actually higher than most interest rates for investors. Right, so actually he does pretty. Depends on the level of risk. So he's also taking a lot of risk, and also the Talmud is saying he's not risking the stuff that's a loan. He's going to get paid back for sure on that. So, but he's totally risking half of it.
But he got the benefit without having to pay any interest on it.
Yeah,
so
that's
that
right.
money was dead money from his vantage point.
Right.
So there has to be a way to overcome that.
Yeah. So later, as the economies grow more sophisticated, the Talmud came up with ways to even overcome these. Yeah, because once it became clear in sophisticated economies, you have to give incentive to investors and basically lend at interest. So you get around the prohibition of lending at interest. And in Israel, which is a Jewish state, right? And in some ways built on Jewish principles, obviously it's also a modern economy. So they've come up with ways, even for the ultra-Orthodox, to lend at interest, to essentially lend at interest. Although they still use these principles. They still use them to get around. Okay. All right. So we're gonna go on page 165. Vemar Rava. Okay. So Rava, who was interested in this, I want to mention also Rava, for the most part, took on or was most concerned about the interests of the investors. For him, it was very important that the investors be protected, whereas the bulk of the other rabbis were more concerned that the active partner, the borrower, be invested. Okay. So Rava was sort of a corrective. Making sure that, and wanting to make sure, and there's no socioeconomic reason necessary for that. It's not like Rava was rich, so therefore he wanted to protect the rich landowners. He was protecting the economy, and this is the way he thought was most useful for the economy. So now we have some more comments about Rava. V'yamar Rava, Haiman dekabel iska min chavrei ufisei. Okay, so people form a business partnership, okay, and they go through the correct stars. They have the correct documents, and they do it all correctly. Okay, and Nebuch, they lose money. Nebuch is a Yiddish term. Very important for the Talmud. It means unfortunately. It took me a long time. I learned the word from my Talmud teacher, and I had to figure it out. I wasn't brought up speaking Yiddish. I had to figure out in context what it meant. But it's a great word, Nebuch, and it means unfortunately. But doesn't Nebuch sound much better than unfortunately? Nebuch. I mean, Nebuch is a sigh. It's Nebuch. It's onomatopoetic. It sounds like what it is. Unfortunately, you sound like a British Don. Nebuch. Yeah, like you're clearing your throat. Okay. Anyhow, so they lose money. Okay. Now. You'll find out as you read further, they lose money, but the active partner doesn't want to tell the investor that they lost money, right? Which happens sometimes, right? Right. Oh, everything's great. Yeah. So they lose money, but the active partner keeps that news from the investors. But u'trach, but he decides he works much harder. That's the word trach means. Malye. And works, puts everything into the business. Velo ode, still doesn't tell the active investor we're in trouble, but he works really hard and he turns things around. So suddenly now business is doing great. But it's only doing great because the active partner put in a lot more time. So now he wants to go to the investor and say, actually you owe me a little more money for my time, for the time I put in. Now what Rava says, Lo matzeh amarle. He's not allowed to say, Dare meheach pseida. Now, I like this phrase. So this loss, now here it's a loss of time. So I want you to, Dare actually means, I want you to dwell with me in that loss. What it literally means is that you should share that loss with me. You should share that loss with me. I have a loss, I guess we'd call it sweat equity, whatever you want to call it. I put a lot of time in this, and I'd like to be compensated. So Rava says he's not allowed to say that. He's not allowed to say it after the fact. He can't say after the fact, I worked much harder than I thought I was going to. So now I should be compensated for that. And the phrase says, Dare pseda. You and me should live together with that loss. Ba'adai, together. Mishum de marle, because the investor can say to him, the reason you worked so hard Ki hechi delo likre lach masid iska. So people then wouldn't call you a loser, or a poor businessman. That's why you worked so hard. So you didn't work so hard to overcome the losses and make a profit for me. You didn't do it for me. You did it for your own reputation. And your reputation now, and that's your sweat equity. That's what you get back. You get back your reputation, which actually has some value. So I don't get the benefit. All I got was what I thought I was going to get. The extra benefit from your working hard goes entirely to you because you were the active partner. And the only reason you worked so hard was to benefit your reputation. And what's implicit in this is that if he had been straight with the active part with the investor from the beginning and say, hey, things aren't working so well here. How about if I put in some extra time and now we'll renegotiate? That's a possibility. But if you're telling the investor after the fact, hey, I worked really hard on this, I should get compensated more, Rava, who, like I said, protects the investor class, is saying, no, you can't do that. Okay? Questions? Yeah, Harvey.
Was there a time limit on this?
Yeah.
I mean,
boy, it's amazing. You're asking questions that are coming up in just a second. There absolutely was a time limit.
Yeah, 'cause I mean,
there was. You would put
the business is doing great. You want to pay the guy off. And the guy says, I don't want to pay. I want to keep you in your partner.
Boy, it's amazing. It's like you read ahead. That's exactly it. No, that'll come up. If not this week, then next week. So I'm going to just say hold the question because that comes up exactly, the time limit. Other questions? Okay.
Well, it was a seasonal thing,
Well, it depends on the business. Yeah,
Right.
It doesn't have to be. People drink Pepsi. I don't know why I'm using Pepsi. I don't even like Pepsi. I don't drink Pepsi. It's not like product placement, like I'm.
Setting product.
Yeah, although it's not a bad idea. We should maybe think about it. We could do that, but it's not. I don't even like Pepsi. But
it was beer.
But people drink Pepsi all the time. Yeah. Okay. Ve'amar Rava. So Rava has another comment. Hani Bei Trey. Okay, you got two people. Now I have to say there's disagreement among the interpreters whether the two people are the classic investor and active partner, or it could be there's two people that are working in the business, so two active partners, and a third who's an investor. That's what Rashi suggests. I have to say, I don't often disagree with Rashi. I'm not sure why Rashi goes that way. Steinsaltz, by the way, always follows Rashi. It's just pretty easy, he just says, I'll just follow Rashi. He's right 95% of the time. As I was reading this over, I was thinking, you could see it either way, but to me, it's actually more logical that it's actually just two partners, one the classic investor and one is the classic borrower. It doesn't really matter in the end. So anyway, Rava says, Hani Beitre da Avde Iska. So two people put together an Iska, a business, Bahade Hadade, together. Turn the page 166. Virava. Okay, so we're getting to Harvey's question right away. They made a profit. Okay. Happy ending, right? or good story here. Two people get together, they make money. Ve'amarle. So one partner says to the other, Chad lechavre. One says to the other, Ta liflog. Let's divide things up. We made a profit. Okay. And the key is it's before the end of the agreement, right? Because the agreement had a time on it. But the guy says, hey, we're doing well. Let's
Cut it up now.
Yeah, what would be a good term? I don't know. I'm not a businessman. Let's just
sell half the stuff.
Take out profit.
Yeah, take our profit. Let's take our profit now. Okay. The Iyamar le'idach. So now the guy can say to him, if the other guy says to him, Narvach tfei, no, I don't want to divide our profit because we will make more money. Dinahu, the law is a cave. The law is that he can actually stop them now from dividing it. Only because the contract itself, the Iska itself, had a time limit. So now they can both agree, if they both agree. Here Rava is also talking about how you stick to contracts. That becomes very important to Rava, and of course it becomes crucial to any modern economy, is that you have an understanding that contracts are going to be enforced, and one can't just retroactively walk away. So that's what he's talking about. So one of the partners can say to the other, you're allowed to suggest, hey, we've made money, let's divide right now. And the other guy can't agree. They can agree. So you can break a contract through mutual agreement. But if the other guy says, no, we want to make more money, we can make more money together, that holds because the contract had a certain amount of time to it. Okay? So that answers one of your questions. But it goes on. The Iamarle, Havli Palga de Ravka. And so he says to him, okay, well, just give me my half. Well, you can keep on the business. I'm not stopping you. But all I want right now is half the profit. Just give me half the profit. Amarle, Ravka lekarna mishtabe. And he says, no, all the profits right now, since we're in the middle of the business, and the Hebrew is mishtabe lekarna. They are tied up. You actually have the word in there, avod, which means they are working. All the money right now is working for the business itself. That's where we're putting all the profits right now. It's tied because of this piece of paper you signed, the contract. None of that money actually belongs to you. Right now, the money has a very specific purpose. It's working for the business. I can't legally take it out of there because you and I agreed that it's working now for the business. Now, what's interesting, the mishtabed, I like that because it says the money is now active. It's doing something. It can't go into your pocket because it's right there over there. Even though on the balance sheet we're classifying it as profit, we agreed we're going to put it back into the business. Okay, is that clear? So in other words, you can't take your money out mid-contract, which is what he wants to do. So the first thing he wants to do is just sell everything and divide. The next thing he says, okay, I'll just take my profit out. Nope, you can't do that because it's working. No, the Iamarle, Havli Palga, Ravka, Upalga Karna. So now he can say, okay, give me half of my profits, and I'll take half of my principal, because that's also half of mine. It's half of each of us. Okay, Amarle Iska Lahadade Mishubad. He said, no, we still have got this contract. Everything we've got, half the profit, half the principal, it's all now working for the iska. And so I can't take it from you, and you can't force me to do that. Okay? Now, Iamarle, Niflog Ravka, Veniflog Karna, so he can say to him, so give me half of my profit, give me half of my principal, the imatelach pseda. Now, because one thing he's worried about is if I give you half, and I go on the business isn't going to do as well, because in general, bigger businesses do better than smaller businesses. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but the Talmud is saying that's the concern of the remaining partner. I'm afraid with your capital gone and your profit gone, we won't do as well. So now he comes back and says, I'll compensate you for that. Okay? I promise, if you now lose money in the business, I will take on that risk. I'm so confident in you, and you'll continue to do well. But obviously this guy now, I want the money now. I need my money right now. And I'm telling you, I will compensate you if in some ways you have a loss now because I abandoned the business. Darena bahadach. So you have that phrase again, I will live with you in that risk of losing money if I withdraw. And now he says, Amarle, he can say back to him, he can stop him from doing and just say, Mazala de Beitrei Adef. He can say back to him, no, I just feel lucky with you. Having you, and he can say, having you as my partner brings me mazel, brings me luck. So I don't want to break up the partnership. So really, and this is just sort of cute way of saying that if one of the partners doesn't want to break up the partnership for whatever reason, even if he's going to be compensated for any risk he might take in breaking the partner, he's allowed to say no. Of course he's allowed to say yes, because that's agreeable to both parties. But he's also allowed to say no, even in what this is saying, even for the flimsiest excuse. The flimsiest excuse is just, I like the look of you. You bring me good luck. I don't want to abandon the partnership, so I'm just not doing it. Forget it. You can't do it. Okay? Is that clear?
Well, is there any question as to what limit this person would guarantee a loss?
Well, he would limit. I'll guarantee any loss from now on. I will guarantee any. I'm so confident in your business. I will guarantee. Maybe there'd be. I guess the limit would be to the end of the agreement, because their agreement is. That's the only reason this comes up. So their agreement is time bound. So he's saying from now till the end of our agreement, if you lose money, I will compensate for you. So you're taking no risk in letting me and just giving me half the money. But he can say, no, the risk I'm taking is that I feel like you and I are lucky together. And if you go off, we won't have that luck. And for the rabbis, obviously, that's a flimsy excuse, and they're giving it as sort of like the drink beer example. They don't really expect the borrower to go and drink beer with the money, but they're saying, that would be the flimsiest possible thing he might do with the money. So here, the flimsiest excuse he could possibly offer is that you and I were lucky together, and it becomes a good excuse. Why? Because he's got a contract. The contract is the real excuse. Yeah. Okay, other questions? Because we're going to start so we'll have time to start a new Mishnah. It's not a new chapter, but it's a new Mishnah. I want you to remember that the Mishnah is about leasing a field. We went far afield, as I said last time, because this is an example of a business, and the leasing arrangement for a field is another example of a business, and it's another kind of an example of a kind of getting around the lending and interest stuff. Because what happens is I lease my field to you, it's like I'm lending you my field. and I'm using my field as an income for me, right? Because I get a third or whatever of the crop. Okay. Let's do. We got 2 minutes, so we'll do the Mishnah. Okay, we're on page 167. Hamikabes sadeh mechaveiro. So you lease a field. That's the classic hamikabel. You lease the field. Velo ratzal in akesh. The person, the lessee, is it the lessee? The person who gets the field. You could also call that person the sharecropper, if you want to use really a technical term. And that's really what it is, right? The sharecropper. And the sharecropper doesn't want to do weeding. You wonder why. It's hard, right? I mean, that's the main thing, is it's hard. He's a little lazy. He doesn't want to do weeding. And he figures he can still get a good crop even if he doesn't weed. Ve'amarla, so he says to the owner, Mach pat lecha. What do you care, actually? What do you care as long as I give you the amount of crops that you expect? And going into this leasing arrangement, there's an expectation of how many oranges he's going to get.
Right.
As long as I give you those amount of oranges, what do you care what I do with your field? Like, you're going to look and make sure that I'm weeding, not weeding, okay? So he says, Ein shomin lo. So you don't listen to him. Remember, the Mishnah is the law. So even if he guarantees a certain amount of money, and the amount of money is reasonable, he's still not allowed to say, I'm not going to weed. Lemachar, because he can say back to him, Lemachar la tayot semimena. What happens is, you're going to leave the field, and you're going to leave me stuck. Umalet lefana asavim, and I'll have all these weeds to deal with. So even if I'm getting the proper amount of income, when you leave, you will have diminished the value of my field, and then I'll lose out. Okay, so there's all sorts of interesting things here too. I mean, it's going to apply to fields. You think of a landlord in an apartment. The person who's renting the apartment says, "What do you care if I put holes in the wall? As long as you get your rent." So the obvious answer is no. When you leave, then I've got holes in the wall.
Well, it's like people leave cleaning deposits, right?
Right.
Because you should give something back in the same condition in which you received it.
Right, yeah, and that's an obvious part of our system now.
Right.
In renting, but it went through, and this seems obvious too. Although the Gemara is usually going to make it not very obvious. So that's one way. So one way you could apply it to rentals in our system right now, and like you said, yes, it's damage deposit. It doesn't matter that I can rely on you for that income. I also have to be concerned with the value of the property.
Rabbi, in a commercial transaction, there's a concept of fair wear and tear accepted.
Yeah, right.
Say again,
There's a concept of fair wear and tear accepted in commercial arrangements as opposed to residential. So this is commercial, right?
Right. It's commercial.
To see what
it's
they
commercial.
say.
Yeah. So that does come up. It does come up.
Okay.
So the other thing that comes up is weeding is not quite the same as no putting holes in the wall for pictures.
Right.
It's not 100% clear that weeding is necessary or type of weeding is necessary to preserve the value of the field. It very much depends on how much you weed. And I'll give you a quick example, then we'll stop. I mean, let's say that let's say the crop is oranges, okay, and the field is big, and it doesn't, and so it includes the place for the orange trees. But it also includes a bunch of other stuff because it's a whole big field. Now, is the expectation that you're going to weed everything because you've got the whole field, or is the expectation that you're only going to weed the profit-making parts of the field, which would be the oranges? And you can imagine the owner and the lessee having a disagreement about that because the lessee doesn't want to go around weeding the places that aren't going to give him any benefit at all, but the owner wants the whole field weeded. So assuming it's not in the contract, what's the fair way to understand that? All right. So, and we'll get into that now.